Hello, this is the video presentation for my essay, Is the Leviathan Useful when Managing Climate Change? We'll go through theorists who go back to Hobbes. We'll look at Mittiga, who talks about democracy being an impediment, and Wainwright and Mann, who proposed the idea of a climate Leviathan, that being a planetary sovereign, who exists in a capitalist system. These authors have a very different starting point than Hobbes, as Hobbes started from the state of nature, and these authors start from today's modern world, which one would argue is incredibly hierarchical and has a lot of people in power. Then we'll see how solving the climate crisis is a matter of justice and is a matter of widening democracy. So, an authoritarian system is not the way to go. We'll start with these authors who claim that authoritarianism should be implemented for the sake of peace and for the sake of rapid solutions. Mittiga draws a parallelism with COVID-19. In crisis, he claims that rapid and imminent solutions are needed. So to do that, we must give up the contingent legitimacy of our governments, which is the means in which governments fulfill their end. Their end is foundational legitimacy. And for Hobbes, foundational legitimacy was peace, and Mittiga translates that to solving the climate crisis. Then Wainwright and Mann proposed the idea, as said, of the climate Leviathan. The climate Leviathan is one of four models that come from the cross of two variables: the existence or not of a capitalist system and the emergence or not of a planetary sovereign. The other three models that are not the climate Leviathan are discarded because they are not realist and because some of them don't work. However, the main argument against these two theories that is proposed is the fact that the starting point is quite different from what Hobbes had. Hobbes justifies authoritarianism and absolute sovereignty from the state of nature. The state of nature is the state of mansolatory, nasty, brutish, and poor because there is no sovereign. However, one would argue that in today's world, we have a clear political sovereignty, and what interests us the most is that we have an economic sovereignty in some way, as climate change is strictly linked to the economic capitalist machinery. If the most polluting companies decided not to, then we wouldn't have a climate crisis. We have an elite to blame for the state we are in today, as they have pursued some economic wealth interests instead of the interest of the whole world population. So, since we have actors who determine our future, our present, and our economy, and they have large sums of power, far larger than any of us have, couldn't we potentially call them economic sovereigns or economic leviathans? The main point here is that we already have hierarchical structures in our world, and they have proved to not be efficient. They have proved to follow their own interests and not the interests of the whole community. And therefore, I go into my last point, where ecologist Democrats like Eckersley talk about how ecologism is not about narrowing democracy and is not seen as a separate thing from democracy. Quite the opposite. Ecologism is about widening democracy because it's about including the voices of ecosystem of future generations into the system. It's about everyone's voices being heard, arguing that in today's system, in today's capitalist system, they are not. When talking about those four models, Wainwright and Mann talked about the climate X. The climate X is what comes from the cross of a non-capitalist system and the non-emergence of a planetary sovereign. It is discarded as it is seen that it could only possibly happen in a world where capitalism and sovereignty aren't hegemonic, not unlike ours. However, an unjust climate transition, ecological transition, doesn't make sense because solving the climate crisis is about justice. So, doing so in an unjust way is contradictory to the ends that we want to fulfill. So, since ecology and caring for the climate is about justice, democracy shouldn't be a problem. It should be the solution.